Since the dawn of civilization, one of humanity's most enduring mysteries has been the origin of language. How did humans develop the ability to speak, communicate complex ideas, and pass culture from generation to generation? This question has inspired myths, legends, and even bizarre experiments, revealing not only our curiosity, but also the limits of knowledge in different ages. One of the earliest and strangest recorded attempts to unravel this mystery happened over 2,500 years ago in ancient Egypt under the rule of Pharaoh Psamtik Wat, reigned circa 664 to 610 BCE. According to ancient historians, Psamtik was not only a powerful ruler, but also a curious mind fascinated by language. His desire to discover which language was the oldest in the world. To find out, he commissioned an unusual experiment. 2 infants were taken from their mothers immediately after birth and placed in complete isolation. These children were raised by mute caretakers who were strictly forbidden from speaking to or even around them. The idea was that without any language input, the children's first utterances would reveal the original language of humanity. After nearly 2 years of silence, the caretaker heard the children utter a word, Bekis or Bekos, which a scholar later identified as Phoenician for bread. Psamtik immediately declared Phoenician to be the world's oldest language. From a modern perspective, Psamtik's experiment is deeply flawed and ethically troubling. We now understand that language development requires social interaction and cannot spontaneously emerge in complete isolation. Without exposure to language, children suffer cognitive and social impairments, and their ability to acquire speech is profoundly damaged. Moreover, expecting infants to invent a full language on their own in a few years is unrealistic. The evolution of language took tens of thousands of years of human development, driven by changes in brain structure, vocal anatomy, and social complexity. Infants are born with the biological capacity for language, but it requires input and interaction to develop. Fast forward again to 1797 France, where a remarkable discovery tested some of these ideas in practice. A boy named Victor was found living wild in the forests near Aveyron. Victor had survived alone for years, deprived of human speech and socialization. His case fascinated scientists and educators who attempted to teach him to speak and live in society. Despite his remarkable survival skills and sharp hearing, Victor only ever learned a few words and never developed normal speech. His case provided early evidence of a critical period for language acquisition, an essential window in early childhood during which the brain is primed to learn language. After this window closes, full language development becomes nearly impossible. Victor's story inspired the 1970 French film The Wild Child, which poignantly portrayed the tragedy of language deprivation. Psamtik was not alone in his pursuit of the original language. In the 13th century, Frederick II, Holy Roman Emperor and King of Sicily, conducted an even more prolonged and infamous experiment. Frederick isolated several infants from birth, ordering that no one speak to them or expose them to any language. The children were well fed and cared for physically, but were deprived of all verbal interaction. After years of silence, none of the children spoke. They made only grunts and basic noises, confirming what modern science now shows. Language must be learned through interaction. Frederick's experiment was both cruel and futile, highlighting the dangers of curiosity unchecked by ethics. Long before scientific inquiry attempted to explain language through biology or anthropology, ancient civilizations turned to myth and religion to answer the mystery. Where did language come from? In the Judeo-Christian tradition, the origin of language is rooted in divine will. The book of Genesis describes how God gave Adam the authority to name the animals, a symbolic act that bestowed humans with the power of language and categorization. This divine act of naming served not just as communication, but as a way to impose order upon chaos. Perhaps the most famous biblical story related to language is the Tower of Babel, Genesis 11:1 through 9. In this tale, all of humanity originally spoke a single language. United by a common tongue, they attempted to build a tower tall enough to reach the heavens. God, displeased with their hubris, confused their speech so they could no longer understand one another, causing them to abandon the project and scatter across the earth. This story provides a theological explanation for the origin of multiple languages and the global dispersal of cultures. The Babel narrative carries deep symbolic weight. It links linguistic fragmentation to divine punishment and portrays human ambition as inherently limited by divine authority. It also reflects a recognition, even in antiquity, that language is both powerful and perilous, capable of uniting people or dividing them. Other cultures have their own myths about the origin of language. In Hindu tradition, language, or vak, is personified as a goddess, considered both the source of divine knowledge and the basis of creation. In some Native American legends, language was a gift from supernatural beings, or was lost and regained through trials and rituals. In certain African mythologies, it is said that language came in a rain, a literal fall of different tongues from the sky, after which each tribe caught only one and could no longer understand others. Such stories show a universal human urge to understand why we speak differently and to tie those differences to cosmic or moral events. Together, these myths and religious accounts do more than fill gaps in early knowledge. They reflect how deeply language is tied to identity, power, and spirituality across cultures. They also underscore an age-old belief that language is not merely a human invention, but a gift or curse bestowed from forces greater than ourselves. In the 20th century, linguistic anthropology took a bold philosophical turn. Two scholars, Edward Sapir and his student Benjamin Lee Whorf, proposed a theory that challenged the common assumption that language is merely a tool to express thought. Instead, they argued that language actually shapes thought. This became known as the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, or more formally, linguistic relativity. At its core, the theory suggests that the structure and vocabulary of the language you speak directly influences how you perceive and understand the world. It's not just that we talk differently, it's that we think differently, depending on our language. Whorf, for instance, studied the Hopi people of the American Southwest and argued that their conception of time was fundamentally different from that of English speakers. While English divides time into distinct units, past, present, future, Whorf claimed that Hopi grammar views time as a more fluid and continuous process. Thus, Hopi speakers may experience time in a way that is less segmented and more cyclical. The hypothesis also explored how vocabulary affects cognition. For example, some indigenous Arctic languages have dozens of words for different types of snow. This isn't just poetic, it's practical and perceptual. If your environment demands constant attention to subtle changes in snow conditions, your language evolves to support that awareness. In turn, you become more attuned to those distinctions. A modern example often cited is color perception. Research has shown that speakers of languages that do not have separate words for blue and green, like in some Southeast Asian tongues, have more difficulty distinguishing between the two colors compared to speakers of languages that differentiate them. In this case, language influences even what the eye notices, while the stronger versions of the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, that language determines thought, have largely been rejected by modern linguistics. The milder form, which states that language influences perception and behavior, is widely supported. Today, this idea has found renewed interest in fields like cognitive science, artificial intelligence, and even political discourse. Language, after all, not only expresses what we think, it constrains, shapes, and sometimes even limits what we can think. So while Pharaoh Psamtik was wrong in hoping that an original word would solve the mystery of human speech, Sapir and Whorf revealed a deeper truth. Language is not simply how we communicate, it's how we construct reality itself. While Psamtik and Frederick's language deprivation experiments were ethically appalling and scientifically flawed, later animal studies offered more controlled and revealing insights into early development. In the 1960s, neuroscientists David Hubel and Torsten Wiesel conducted groundbreaking experiments on kittens that reshaped our understanding of brain plasticity. Kittens raised in rooms with only vertical stripes grew up unable to perceive horizontal shapes. Their visual systems had simply not developed the neural circuits to process what they had never seen. These experiments demonstrated that sensory input during critical developmental windows is essential. Miss it, and the brain cannot recover. This principle extends beyond vision. Language, too, has a critical period. If children are not exposed to language early in life, their brains lose the ability to fully acquire it later. This has been tragically confirmed in modern cases, such as Jeannie, a girl who spent her early years in extreme isolation and was never able to fully develop speech after being rescued. Similar patterns emerge across species. Songbirds need to hear adult songs early on to learn to sing properly. Owls raised with altered auditory cues can adapt only if exposed early. Monkeys, deprived of maternal care, as in Harry Harlow's studies, suffer severe emotional and cognitive impairments. These cases affirm a central truth. Development isn't just genetic, it's shaped by experience. Without the right stimuli at the right time, the brain's potential cannot unfold. Psamtik's fantasy that language would naturally emerge in silence ignored a fundamental law of biology. Learning begins with interaction. The combined lessons of Psamtik's experiment, Victor's story, Frederick II's cruelty, and animal studies converge on one conclusion. There is no innate, natural language that emerges spontaneously without social and environmental input. Language is a uniquely human gift shaped by millions of years of evolution, requiring nurture, culture, and interaction to flourish. Today, these ancient and medieval experiments are viewed through a critical ethical lens. Deliberate deprivation of language or social interaction is considered abuse. Contemporary linguistics, neuroscience, and psychology instead focus on understanding how language develops naturally, how to support children with language delays, and how to preserve endangered languages. The question of where language comes from remains fascinating because it touches the core of human identity. Language is not merely a tool, it shapes our reality. our thoughts, and our connection with others. From the isolated infants of Samtik the Frems to modern studies on brain development, the journey to understand language reflects humanity's enduring search for knowledge and meaning.